What I've put together here is a quick video to give you an understanding of the Struts2 vulnerabilities that have come up. First off, we're just going to have a quick look at the Struts2 application. This is the test application that's provided to developers from the Apache Foundation. And in the case of the March vulnerability, it had to do with the file upload functions. You can see here the code that the developer would want to use is available here. So this is some sample Java code that would be run on the Java server underneath the Tomcat environment, any configuration they need, and then the web page that you would use to render the client side. What the hacker's going to use is actually an application. So what I've got here is a vulnerability test that I've downloaded. It's a Python program, and basically what it does is it sets up the components for the payload to be executed through the vulnerability. So the different components we see here, initially you can see the command, the Python command that I'm running, the host name. So I've changed the Python a little bit, just take the host name. You can see we're running an unprotected server, and then the actual command we're going to execute. And when we execute that command, we get a little debug code, shows us what the payload looks like, but lo and behold, we actually get a directory running from inside the web server as the owner of the Tomcat process, which happens to be Tomcat Runner. What we can do now is we can actually hunt around the box and look for some interesting things. So what we're doing here is we're actually using the Apache sites enabled folder to tell us what's on the machine. And then we're actually pulling the information from those config files. So in this case, we're getting the configuration for the DVWA application. And what we can then do is do a directory of the DVWA application itself. So it's sitting in var DVWA. And if you're familiar with a PHP application, there'll be a config file, which would usually have some very interesting information in it. So if we happen to cat this file for ourselves, you can see the file here. We're going to cat and get the contents of that file. And lo and behold, what do we get? But we now have all the database information that the DVWA application would have in order for it to grab the database connection. So if we wanted to go and pull information from the database, we can now just execute some commands. So here what I'm doing is setting up a text file in the temp folder. It's just going to have my information. If I want to get, say, the admin user's password from this, I can do a select star from users. I pipe that to a file, and then I just now can run MySQL with the username and password that I've got from my config file and execute that. Oops, forgot to put the database on there. I also know the name of that from the config file, and bingo, we now have the password for the administrator. Now, that's a hashed password, but I'm sure anybody can go to CrackStation and figure that out. How do we stop this? So ASM is a web application firewall. So the web application firewall will be able to run signature-based protection against these things and look for certain strings in the conversation. So even so that this is an SSL protected application, we're doing an SSL decryption and we're setting it decrypted to the web application firewall. So as soon as it sees it, we actually get a blocking page. So that's just an HTML page that would be rendered in a browser, but here we just see it on screen. And we get a support ID. So that long number actually refers to a support ID that if we wanted to go and find out exactly why that was blocked, we would go to the web application firewall event logs, and we can pull up that support ID and find out what was triggered on that particular request. So we're going to paste that in, put the support ID in here, we apply the filter, and it gives us the offending request, and we can see that that was blocked. And judging by the amount of red on this, there is a whole bunch of things that were triggered on this. So we can see the different strings that were triggered in the little the red boxes there. So those are the things that the signatures have fired on and are now blocking that request. So it's actually seeing those requests coming through as vulnerable. The interesting thing too here is that these are all specific for the Java Struts case, but the actual issuance of the command is through the command.exe file. So that actually, or command, and we actually trigger on that. So even if it was a 0 day, we'd stop it because we'd see those weird commands. And so we just need to, in the policy, we just simply need to turn on the remote command execution signatures.